The first thing my landlady said when I walked through the front door after my date wasn't, "How did it go?" It wasn't, "Did you have fun?" She looked at my face for a long moment, smiled with heartbreaking sadness, and quietly told me that the woman I had just spent the afternoon with didn't love me like she did. In that single sentence, everything I believed about my lonely little apartment, my quiet life, and the woman who rented me a room began to unravel. What I discovered over the following weeks would force me to question every memory I had buried, every promise I had broken, and every chance at happiness I thought I had already lost forever. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. 3 years earlier, I had packed everything I owned into the back of an aging pickup truck and driven across 3 states with nothing but a suitcase, a toolbox, and a heart that felt too heavy to carry. My name is Nolan Mercer, and at 32 years old I had already watched my dreams collapse twice. The first time was when my father passed away unexpectedly and I left college to support my family. The second came when the woman I planned to marry admitted she had fallen in love with someone else. After that, staying in my hometown felt like trying to breathe inside a room with no windows. The small house I rented sat on a peaceful street lined with maple trees whose leaves danced in the sunlight every afternoon. It belonged to a 70-year-old widow named Evelyn Cross. She lived downstairs while I rented the finished attic apartment. The arrangement was simple. I fixed broken shelves, carried groceries, shoveled snow during winter, and occasionally repaired neighbors' appliances. She charged me less than any apartment in town because, as she often said with a gentle smile, empty houses become lonely long before people do. Evelyn possessed a quiet warmth that reminded me of afternoons at my grandmother's kitchen table. She always baked too many muffins, made enough soup for an army, and somehow knew exactly when someone needed company without asking. We developed a comfortable routine. Every morning before work I helped water her flowers. Every Sunday afternoon we shared tea on the front porch while watching children ride bicycles past the house. People in the neighborhood assumed she treated me like a grandson, and perhaps she did. Yet there was something else hidden behind her thoughtful eyes. Sometimes she looked at me with an expression that seemed far older than affection, almost as though she was remembering someone she desperately wished she could see again. I never asked. Some mysteries seem kinder when left untouched. Eventually, my co-workers convinced me to start dating again. They argued that no one deserved to spend every weekend fixing leaky faucets or organizing old photo albums for an elderly landlady. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet someone named Camille Harper, a pediatric nurse with an easy laugh and bright green eyes. Our first date happened on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. We visited a botanical garden filled with blooming roses and winding stone paths. Camille was thoughtful, intelligent, and genuinely kind. We spoke for hours about childhood dreams, favorite books, and the strange ways grief changes people without anyone noticing. As wonderful as the afternoon was, something inside me refused to fully open. I smiled, laughed, listened carefully, yet my heart remained strangely quiet. When I returned home just before sunset, Evelyn was trimming lavender beside the front porch. She looked up immediately. She studied my expression instead of asking about the date. Then came the sentence that changed everything. She softly said the woman didn't love me like she did. I laughed nervously, convinced she was making an awkward joke. But Evelyn wasn't laughing. Her eyes filled with tears she seemed too exhausted to hide. She apologized almost immediately, claiming she hadn't meant to say it aloud. She hurried inside before I could ask what she meant, leaving me frozen beside the front steps with confusion settling into my chest like cold rain. For days afterward, everything felt different. Every interaction with Evelyn carried invisible questions neither of us addressed. She became quieter than usual. Sometimes I caught her looking at old photographs before quickly placing them back inside drawers whenever I entered the room. Meanwhile, Camille continued reaching out. She suggested another daytime picnic near the lake. She invited me to an outdoor art festival. She even surprised me by bringing homemade cookies to my workplace. She was wonderful. She deserved someone whose heart wasn't occupied by unanswered questions. Instead of growing closer to Camille, I found myself becoming obsessed with understanding Evelyn's strange confession. One rainy afternoon she slipped while carrying laundry downstairs. I rushed to help her. As we gathered scattered towels, an old envelope fell from between the folded blankets. Inside rested a faded photograph. The young man smiling beside Evelyn looked exactly like me. Not similar. Not vaguely familiar. Exactly like me. The same dark hair. The same crooked smile. The same small scar above the left eyebrow. My hand started shaking. Evelyn gently took the photograph and whispered there were stories she had hoped never to tell. She invited me into the downstairs living room, where afternoon sunlight filtered softly through lace curtains. Her voice trembled as she explained that decades earlier she had given birth to a son named Daniel. He disappeared at 23 after leaving home following a painful argument. Months later authorities declared him dead after identifying belongings recovered from a flooded river, although his body was never found. For 47 years Evelyn believed she had buried her only child without ever saying goodbye. I quietly reminded her that I wasn't Daniel. She nodded. She knew. Yet every time she looked at me she saw the same kindness. The same smile. The same habit of rubbing my neck whenever I felt nervous. The resemblance had slowly reopened wounds she believed had healed. When she said she loved me more than my date ever could, she hadn't meant romantic love. She meant the desperate, unconditional love of a mother whose heart had spent nearly half a century searching for someone impossible to replace. I thought that explanation would end the mystery. Instead, it began another. Because before placing the photograph away, I noticed something written on the back. For my little Noah. Not Daniel. Noah. My birth name. I stared at the faded handwriting until my vision blurred. My adoption papers listed me as Noah before my parents renamed me Nolan. The room suddenly felt too small to breathe inside. Evelyn noticed my expression immediately. She asked what was wrong. When I showed her my adoption documents later that evening, silence swallowed the room. Daniel had disappeared in the spring. 9 months later, an infant named Noah entered foster care after both biological parents supposedly died in a highway accident. My birthday matched perfectly. The impossible possibility stood between us. Could Daniel have been my father? Neither of us slept much over the following week. DNA tests were arranged. Every passing day stretched endlessly. Camille noticed I had become distant. Instead of accusing me, she simply asked whether I was carrying something too painful to explain. I wanted to tell her everything. Yet the story sounded unbelievable even inside my own mind. Then the results arrived. Evelyn wasn't imagining anything. She wasn't confused. She wasn't simply grieving. She was my biological grandmother. Daniel had been my father. The authorities had mistaken another man's belongings for his after the flood. Daniel had survived. He'd built another life under a different name, believing everyone back home hated him after the argument. Years later, he and my mother died together in the accident that left me orphaned. No one connected the records. No one informed Evelyn. For nearly 30 years, a simple clerical mistake had separated an entire family. When the truth settled over us, neither of us could stop crying. She reached for my hands with trembling fingers, whispering she had spent decades asking God for one more chance to hold someone from her family. She never imagined that prayer would arrive disguised as a tenant needing affordable rent. The weeks that followed transformed both our lives. Instead of landlord and renter, we slowly became grandmother and grandson. We cooked together. Sorted through dusty family albums. Visited the cemetery where my parents rested. For the first time in my life, I heard stories about my father's childhood. I learned he loved baseball. He played terrible guitar. He once rescued an injured owl that lived in Evelyn's garage for months. Every memory stitched together pieces of my identity that had always felt missing. Yet healing wasn't simple. I struggled with anger. Anger toward paperwork that failed us. Toward strangers who made assumptions. Toward fate itself. Mostly, I grieved the decades stolen from us. No amount of love could return birthdays never celebrated. Graduations never attended. Christmas mornings spent apart. One afternoon, while sitting beneath an old oak tree, Evelyn quietly admitted she still blamed herself for the argument that drove Daniel away. She believed one harsh sentence had destroyed her family forever. I looked at the woman whose kindness had rescued me long before either of us understood why. Then I realized guilt had imprisoned her almost as long as loneliness had imprisoned me. I reminded her that love isn't measured by our worst moments. It's measured by whether we keep our hearts open after making mistakes. For the first time since I met her, I watched decades of shame leave her face. Around that same time, I finally met Camille again. I expected disappointment. Instead, she smiled warmly after hearing the entire story. She confessed she had known something extraordinary was happening because every time I spoke about Evelyn, my voice carried hope instead of confusion. She wasn't jealous. She wasn't offended. She simply thanked me for choosing honesty before pretending to love someone while my heart was elsewhere. Months passed. Life slowly found a new rhythm. Evelyn officially stopped calling me her tenant. She introduced me to neighbors as her grandson. Every time she spoke those words, tears quietly filled her eyes. Mine usually did too. We renovated the old house together. The upstairs apartment became my permanent home. The downstairs living room filled with new family photographs beside the old faded ones. For the first time, past and present existed together instead of competing for space. Then one crisp autumn afternoon, Camille knocked on our front door carrying a homemade apple pie. She wasn't there to restart our relationship. She simply wanted to meet the remarkable woman whose unexpected confession had rewritten 2 lives. Watching them laugh together across the kitchen table felt strangely perfect. Sometimes people enter our lives not to become our forever, but to gently guide us toward where we truly belong. A year later, our neighborhood gathered for Evelyn's 71st birthday in the front yard she had tended for decades. Children played beneath colorful balloons. Neighbors shared stories. Music drifted softly through the afternoon air. As everyone celebrated, Evelyn quietly squeezed my hand and whispered that loneliness had convinced her God had forgotten her. She smiled through grateful tears as she admitted she had been wrong. He had simply taken the long road home. Speech balloon special request: before the story ends, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in this situation? If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more meaningful and inspiring stories. Your support encourages us to keep creating stories that touch hearts around the world. As the sun settled gently across the neighborhood, I stood on the same porch where one impossible sentence had first shattered my understanding of the world. I realized that love doesn't always arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes it appears as patience, quiet sacrifice, unexpected family, or a second chance hidden inside ordinary days. The woman I thought was simply my landlady became the grandmother I never knew I still had, and the home I rented became the home where my heart finally found its place. If there's one lesson my journey taught me, it's this: never underestimate the power of kindness, forgiveness, and hope. Even after years of loss, life can still surprise you with miracles waiting patiently behind the next ordinary door.